Hello once again, Top Hat Phony here, and this is the third chapter of Butterflies by Ghosttown Brony on Finfiction. Apologise. I needed a drink. Copperberg Strawberry and Lime is best cider. Sorry. It's really dark this time of year, like seriously dark. I was just thinking, if America, or whatever's on the opposite side of the planet to England, I'm sorry, I'm terrible at geography, so don't quote me on this. But if it gets, if we've got we've just had maybe the shortest day here kind of thing, do you just have the longest day on the opposite side of the planet? Someone more sciencey will have to, or geography smart will have to answer that, because I have no idea. Yeah, just a question thrown out there. But anyway, you didn't come here to hear me ponder the existence of differences around the world or whatever. Anyway, yes, I will start the chapter. This chapter is called Pain. And without further ado, I will read. Just like that, the magic ended. This is from Fluttershy's point of view now, by the way. It was always according to the chapter. Just like that, the magic ended. The thrill and excitement and happiness that had coursed through her at Rainbow's sudden advance disappeared, replaced now by terror. "Rainbow!" she gasped. "Fluttershy, I'm fine. Relax," the blue Pegasus replied in a cautious tone. She gently placed her hoof on Fluttershy's chest, an attempt at reassuring gesture. "You're not fine, Dashie. You're bleeding." She attempted to get up, forgetting the chest still pressed tightly against her own. The pain in her wing returned with a sharp bite. "Take it easy," Rainbow said, the way a mother might say to her foal. "You passed out for a really long time." The light Rainbow had carried in her eyes since they kissed went away, and a look of guilt came to her face. "Fluttershy, I'm so sorry. I can't believe I did this to you." The yellow mare was shocked by how swift she was to take the blame for it. After all, she was the one who grabbed her when she tried to leave. "Dashie," she began to say, but was quickly cut off. "No, Fluttershy, this was all me." She stared into her eyes with deep intensity. Her magenta eyes were rimmed with red. She was about to cry. "I was in such a rush to get away over something so stupid, and I wound up hurting you." Fluttershy could feel each shaking breath against her body. She wanted to say something. She didn't want to let her take the blame, but, like always, she couldn't find any words. "The way you screamed when I—" She didn't finish. She shut her magenta eyes tight. A single tear rolled down her cheek and hit Fluttershy on her nose. It tickled. Still unable to find her voice to tell her it wasn't her fault, Fluttershy could only do the easiest thing that came to mind. She pushed her own face up as far as she could and locked lips with her friend once again. She could tell from the way her heavy breaths paused it was Rainbow's turn to be surprised. But her recovery was quick, and Fluttershy felt her lips moving with hers. The only lips she had ever been familiar with. Rainbow Dash was her first kiss. The flurry of emotions that coursed through her was very confusing. Her very first kiss had been shared with a mare. She'd never really given much thought to kissing, let alone which gender, but she'd always wondered what that feeling she got in her chest whenever she saw her rainbow-maned friend was. Every time they locked eyes, she felt like Some pony was standing on her chest, and she had to fight to keep a blush from creeping into her face. The kiss held a good distraction from her injury for a while, but slowly the ache returned to Fluttershy's wing, and she became unable to ignore it. She pulled away gently and tried not to give any indication of her pain. She didn't need Rainbow to feel any worse. She'd done a really good job at patching her wing up, but the pain was definitely still there. That, however, was a hurt that only time could heal. Unlike the large gash Rainbow was keeping concealed under her wing, when she opened her eyes, they found a blushing blue face staring down expectantly at her. With a start, she remembered what Rainbow had said to her after the first kiss. She'd gotten such a shock from Rainbow's state, she'd completely forgotten. Instantly, she felt racked with guilt. How could she have forgotten to say that? Luckily, the words came to her much faster now, and breathlessly she blurted out, "I love you too." The smile that came to Rainbow's lips was extremely gratifying, and she let herself get lost in one more kiss. It made it easy to forget when their lips were connected. Easy to forget the pain in her wing. Easy to forget where they were. The world seemed to just fall away in the mare's embrace. It was like a drug. Heat crept up to her face, and the longer their lips lingered, the better the feeling got. But Rainbow was hurt, and they couldn't spend the rest of their days kissing in the cave. No matter how much she wanted to. So, when their lips finally parted for the third time, Fluttershy broke free from her thoughts of romance and dreams, and started thinking like she usually did, like a vet. "Rainbow Dash," she said quietly, yet commanding, "I need to take a look at your cut." She thought that Rainbow would have fought a little harder to stay and kiss, but she seemed far away now, and the happiest Fluttershy had seen her in months. The blue Pegasus slid off her chest and lay down on her uninjured side. She found a large rock jutting from the floor for her head to rest against. Only when she was off did Fluttershy realize how cold the cave really was. Suddenly she longed for her warmth, for her warm cyan blanket again. "No, I have to focus." The pink-maned pony was taken aback by how difficult it was to keep her mind straight. "It's so cold in here." She slowly and shakily got herself up to her hooves. Rainbow had changed her trance-like stare into one of concern, and Fluttershy noticed the blue mare shift slightly. The sudden change in blood flow worsened the throbbing of her wing, but she ignored it. Then suddenly the throbbing turned into a fire, and a small cry escaped her. Quick as a whip, Rainbow Dash was right beside her. You all right?" "I'll be fine," she said, trying not to grit her teeth. She wanted the blue pony to hold her, protect her, cover her once more, but even as they stood there, the slow pattering sound of blood dripping from the tip of her cyan feather bounced all across the cave. She had Dash lay down again after a few more assurances that she was okay, and she began her examination. "Rainbow, I need you to lift your wing a bit." Rainbow Dash did as she was asked, and stopped when it was about half unfurled. "It hurts too bad if I lift it any higher," she said with a grimace. But the height she had lifted it to was more than enough for her to get a good look at the damage. She tried to stifle a gasp, but it didn't work. The wound was gruesome. Half a foot of rent flesh directly under the base of her wings. Luckily, it wasn't deep enough to see bone, but it cut into the muscle. Somehow, the blood was minimal, but even as she stared, small trails of blood began to flow down her blue body. The area where she had kept the bleeding at bay with her wing had stained her fur purple. "Rainbow Dash," she said. "This is much worse than I expected. I can't treat this." She knew that she had absolutely nothing in the way of medical supplies, but she hadn't expected the size of the cut. She was surprised by how calm Rainbow Dash was, though, still just staring up at her, waiting for her to tell her what to do. "There's nothing we can do here. You need a hospital and an actual doctor," she stressed. The stress of the sight of this injury, coupled with the intense, unwavering pain in her wing, made her feel a little, very lightheaded. She had to sit down. This was serious. A cut like that, in this environment, would undoubtedly get infected. And that could cause a lot of issues. And death wasn't such a far-fetched possibility. No, she couldn't think like that, and she definitely couldn't tell her that. She took a few deep breaths to collect her thoughts and calm her racing heart. "Okay," she breathed. Even her small voice echoed across the cave. "There's nothing we can do. You advised keep pressure on it, and covering it from infection, so I need you to keep that wing closed until we get you to a hospital." She put her hoof on Dash's wing and pushed it gently down, pressing it slightly against her body to show her how much pressure to put. Rainbow winced slightly as the wing connected with her gash. She brought the same hoof up to her own forehead, trying to organize her thoughts. "You also need to take things easy. Any strenuous activities poses a risk of widening the cut, so no running." Rainbow continued to stare for a minute before she put the pieces together. "Wait, you're saying that I can't fly until we get back home? We have to walk like this?" she asked, pointing at her injury. "I guess so," Fluttershy said meekly. A groan of frustration escaped the colourful Pegasus. For the first time since they had gotten trapped, Rainbow seemed almost aggravated, which was understandable. The idea was very unappealing to her as well. They had flown to the edge of the Everfree Forest. The flight had taken almost 2 hours at Rainbow's breakneck speeds. Even if the walk wasn't through miles of tree and hill-covered terrain, it would take several days. Add to that the fact that they would have to take it very slow to avoid worsening their cuts. The trip would be far from short. "Well, what are we waiting for?" Rainbow said, rising to her hooves. "The less time we're stuck here, the better." Some of her old brashness returned to her voice. She had expected her to be more concerned with the fact that she couldn't fly. Flying was her life, wasn't it? If she didn't know Rainbow as well as she did, she would have assumed it was just her tendency for speed taking over again, not wanting to be cooped up, not wanting to sit around. But Fluttershy knew better. She had figured it out a while ago, but Rainbow was... She figured it out a while ago, but Rainbow was terrified of the forest. Sorry about that. That was in the text. She was okay with it in large numbers, but she never entered it alone. The one time Fluttershy had talked her into a picnic at a beautiful little clearing a small way into the forest, she had been really antsy, jumping at the smallest of noises. She didn't even finish eating. She never pointed it out to her, knowing it would be a huge slight on her pride, but as terrified as she was, she knew staying was far worse than just getting out as fast as possible. And that was something Fluttershy could definitely agree with. She had no objections to getting out of this cave. She stared a few feet back to where Rainbow had nursed her wounds and shared a kiss. She wanted to remember what it looked like, as much as what it felt like. It was a moment that would never come again, so she wanted to capture it in her mind's eye, to be able to replay it. Then she lifted herself up to a standing position. Both ponies looked to the entrance. The small beams of light that shone through the cracks made it very tempting to try and unblock the exit, but it would have been a slow process and extremely unsafe. She looked back to Rainbow Dash, who seemed to have the same idea on her mind. So they turned to the back of the cave. The light didn't reach far enough back to see, but she could tell the cave continued for at least another 10 or 15 feet. Dash started to walk towards the back of the cave, and Fluttershy followed slowly, a little apprehensive to approach the darkness. But if she thought of it like she was just following Rainbow Dash, it wasn't so scary. But soon they were no longer walking towards the darkness, but part of it. When it started to become difficult to see the pony in the lead, Fluttershy moved a little closer, and a little closer, and closer, until they were practically touching. Then soon they were touching, for the darkness had swallowed them completely, and the vibrant colours of the mare to her became practically invisible. Fluttershy's heart began to thump wildly. Her only solace was knowing who was beside her. Suddenly, something touched her back, and she nearly jumped out of her skin. She sucked in a sharp gasp, and she heard a voice beside her. "Relax, it's just me." Fluttershy began to recognise the tickle of feathers on her back, and realised the warm thing was Rainbow Dash's wing. The pain in her own injured wing subsided a bit as she became aware of her side rubbing against Rainbow's. The warmth she had felt underneath her when light existed returned to her. She felt a flush creep into her cheeks. She'd never been so close to another pony. She had truly meant what she said, that she'd loved her, but this was completely foreign to her. She had never acknowledged her feelings before. Why would Rainbow feel the same way towards her? She wanted big things. She wanted to be a Wonderbolt, for everyone to know her name. All Fluttershy wanted was to live quietly, surrounded by nature, in her little cottage. She just wanted the simple life. They lived on different levels, figuratively and literally. They were friends. That was as far as it went. But now she knew Rainbow's true feelings. She loved her. Fluttershy couldn't imagine why, but this beautiful mare loved her, and she loved her back. What did this mean, though? She felt like she should say something. She was in love right now, right? She shouldn't. Shouldn't she be swooning, or at least talking to her friend? There it was again. That word. Friend. That's what she'd always called her. But now the title didn't seem fitting. Her filly friend? Her special sun pony? She started to get frustrated, thrown so far out of her comfort zone, not only physically but mentally. But she fought it back, because whenever she got frustrated, she usually started to cry. Though tears were nothing new to either of them, she felt that there had been enough of them for one day. So instead, of focusing on what she didn't know, she focused on what she did. She knew, without a doubt, that she loved Rainbow Dash. The way that a stallion loves a mare, or a mare loves a stallion, like it says in the writing. She knew that if she had to be trapped and stranded far from civilization, there was no pony she would rather be with. And she knew that she didn't want Dashie to die. It was hard to get her romantic thoughts out of her head, so she had stopped trying, but even harder to forget was the sneering gash hidden under Rainbow's other wing. She felt her face warm and thought she was blushing again, before realizing that the warmth was only on her right cheek. Fluttershy rubbed her cheek against Rainbow's affectionately. "Do you really love me?" asked Dash. "Do you really love me?" asked Dash softly, sounding almost afraid of the answer. "Yes," the yellow mare whispered back. The sound of their hooves echoed around in the darkness, making it sound like the cavern was bustling with other ponies. She didn't know how long they had been walking. It was black, and each step was taken slow. Fluttershy closed her eyes, or at least she thought she was closing her eyes. In the darkness it was impossible to tell. She heard Rainbow sigh with satisfaction, right before both ponies hit their head on a wall they couldn't see. As of yet, they had met no obstruction, aside from the occasional stray stone to trip them. "Ow!" They both winced, but compared to the injuries they had already sustained, it felt like nothing, and they both gave a small chuckle. She could hear Rainbow tapping the dark wall with her hooves. Then she started moving towards the left. Fluttershy followed closely, partially out of fear of getting lost, and partly because she really wanted to keep their bodies together. The warmth and subtle connection felt almost like home to the yellow mare, and she wasn't eager to give it up. But suddenly, the task became much less difficult when the vibrant colours of Dash's rainbow mane became visible once again. The light was still dim, but no dimmer than the entrance to the cave. Once again, the ponies could see the jagged rock that surrounded their world. As they continued, it became brighter, and Fluttershy could see the beaming smile Rainbow Dash was giving her, and she returned it full-heartedly. Even though there was no chance of losing each other now, Rainbow Dash still kept Fluttershy close under her wing, and Fluttershy had no intention of moving out from under it. The narrow passage of the cave suddenly opened up into a large cavern. Fluttershy became aware of all the plant life surrounding them and looked up to see the source of the light. Sunlight spilled in through a wide hole at the top of the large room, pressed tightly against the near sheer stony wall. And with that, their brief, hopeful smiles quickly fell. As they saw the roof of the cavern was at least 50 feet from the floor, that was quite a long way for ponies who can't fly. And that was the third chapter of Butterflies. Again, thank you ever so much for listening. Stay tuned, and I will have more chapters up from this very enjoyable fan fiction. I advise that you, if you're listening, don't be deterred by the fact they're in a cave. It gets far more interesting. Trust me, you have to have a little faith. It is a brilliant story if you're into like romance and tragedy. I'm not going to give any more away because it kind of might ruin the story for you. If you've already read it, then good for you. It's a pretty good story. It hasn't actually got that many views on film fiction, as it probably deserves. I think it's got, at the moment, it's got 56 likes and 7 dislikes, but an awful lot of comments. It's got 641 views. It's not really like mainstream for film fiction standard, I don't think, but I haven't been on here very long. But it's a very good story, and I recommend you check out his stuff. He's actually got, as I was saying before, there's another story going on that is only just started, which is, I think it's to do with Applejack and a tragic. It's another tragedy, slice of life romance thingy, and it's probably just as good, but I haven't got around to reading it yet because at the moment I'm reading like this vampire one, which seems pretty good as well. It's not really a tragedy. I'll probably like link it. Maybe I'll probably link it in the bottom of the description for this one if any of you want to check it out. But yeah, it's quite long. I think it's got like 20 something chapters. Not this one. This one's still got about 20 chapters. But anyway, enough rambling from me. Thank you everybody, every pony, for listening to this edition of this whatever of the chapter 3 of thingy, and this is Top Hat Phony signing out.